The French government, as we just heard, they're putting a lot of money towards this problem. Is it going to be enough, though?
According to women's groups, it's not enough. They wanted around €1 billion, and at the end of the day, it turns out the government is only going to spend somewhere in the order of €350, €360 million. What they've done is unveil 50 or so measures, which will be introduced in a bill in January. There's a number of key points attached to this raft of measures. One is prioritising police training. That has proven to be a major problem in terms of dealing with domestic violence in this country. Also, formally recognising psychological violence as a form of domestic violence. Forced suicides will now be recognised as femicide. A number of regional centres will be established to basically rehabilitate men who've been convicted of lesser crimes associated with domestic violence. In addition, the judicial system is now going to be overhauled and streamlined, because a lot of the other problems have been associated with the fact that cases linger in the legal system for years and years, and people who are victims of domestic violence are forced to not have a resolution, and in some cases also forced to still deal with the very person who's been accused of the violence. As well, judges could also order an electronic tag for a person who has yet to be convicted of a crime but is targeted by a restraining order. They will also possibly look at seizing firearms, again from people suspected of domestic abuse. And the other thing is sort of basically allowing medical professionals in a hospital environment to overcome legal obstacles surrounding confidentiality when it comes to signalling to authorities that there are indeed problems with an individual in regards to domestic violence. And on top of that, a look at promoting gender equality within schools, particularly directed towards boys, teaching them to challenge those deeply held views about inequalities and social norms that effectively perpetuate a man's control over women, and as a result reinforce tolerance for violence against women and girls.
Now, the femicide rate here in France, one woman killed every 3 days. Why is it so high here in France?
It really is an astounding statistic when you think about it, Claire. I mean, France is one of the world's, top 6 wealthiest nations, and here we are, nearly 20 years into the 21st century, and this statistic is one of the highest in Western Europe. In fact, let's just have a look now by comparing how France stands in relation to other countries in Europe. Now, if you look at Eastern Europe, places such as Romania and so on also register fairly high. But then when you swing across to Western Europe, the only country that is ahead of France is indeed Germany. And also, in addition, what is interesting is that Italy, Greece, Spain and other European countries are actually quite significantly behind. It is indeed a problem. Why? Many will point to the fact that the police have been slow in dealing with this issue. As I mentioned just earlier, the judicial system has been overloaded with a lot of these cases, and there clearly is a need for that to be sorted out. There's also, as some would say, particularly French feminists, that these figures are effectively the tip of the iceberg in what they say is still a deeply sexist society. And that is the sort of the contrast you get with France, because the image that this nation has abroad, this is the country that brought the world the revolution, those Republican values, liberty, equality and fraternity. But in fact, the reality on the ground is still very conservative. And laws based on the Napoleonic Code, which historically affirmed the legal right of men to control women, are still impacting the legal code at this point in time.
So who's leading the way then in Europe?
Well, there's certainly a number of countries which have put into place what they call best practices. For instance, the Netherlands, and we'll have a graphic here now that will show you some of those countries. Sweden is also ahead of the bell curve as well. But everybody keeps referring to Spain. The reason being is in 2004, the Spanish government introduced a series of laws which resulted in key reforms in Spanish courts to deal with domestic violence. Notably, special judges were trained and appointed, and they have the power to process suspected cases of domestic violence within 72 hours. They really speed up the process. And as a result, not surprisingly, the figures since then have dropped in the last 15 years or so. Having said that, there is still a pushback. There are some, including on the far right and with the rise of the Vox Party, who feel that the pendulum has swung too far in the favour of women and believe that those laws should be re-looked at, would you believe what is the case? So even a country like Spain, which really is leading the way here in Europe, there are still people within its own borders who still question whether in fact those laws are worth keeping in place or not.
Unbelievable, has to be said. All right, thank you very much indeed, Annette. Annette Young, who presents the 51% here on France 24.